Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first ever virtual meeting of the Transportation Committee of the Los Angeles City Council. Today is Monday, May 18. I am the chair of the committee, Councilman Mike Bonin. I am joined today virtually by
this call is now being recorded.
The 5th District and with members of city staff, and we are also available online for public participation and comment. The audio of this meeting is broadcast live on the internet at www.lacity.org/government/follow-meetings/council-committee-meetings. We need a bit.ly link or something for that. Audio can also be heard at 213-61-CITY or 818-904-9450 or 310-471-CITY or 310-547-CITY. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda today, call 669-900-6833. Again, that's 669-900-6833, and use meeting ID number 987-0899-4173, and then press pound. I'm going to repeat that again. Call 669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 987-0899-4173, followed by pound. So with that, we will begin. As I said, Mr. Koretz and I are here today. And there are, just to start out, Mr. Koretz, I'm going to recommend that we continue items 6 and 8, if that's okay with you.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Mr. Villanueva, do you need us to take a roll call on that? Or?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So,
Councilmember Bonin?
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz? Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we have 2 ayes and one no, I guess, absent.
Yeah, and 1 absent. So that is the direction of the committee. Items 6 and 8 will be continued. So we have 7 other items on the agenda. I understand there is some public comment, so we will take, in order to have an early virtual meeting, we will, as the council does, take all of the public comment at the front end of the meeting. So when we get to the speakers, they can identify which items they are calling on and whether or not they would like to make a general public comment as well. We will be doing all of that at the beginning of the meeting. And in order to do that, to facilitate it, Mr. Bruins of my staff is going to be helping with the public comment and connecting the caller to the line. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I am going to go first to caller area code 213. The last 3 digits of the phone number are 637. You are now unmuted. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to comment on.
On public comment, please. General public comment.
Okay. You may begin. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. My name is Hernandez. I am from the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. I would like the Department of Transportation to allow the taxis to go back to the airport. And number 2, I would like the franchise extension to go to the end of the year instead of July 1. Those are my 2 points. And the third one is right now the taxis are not working, and would you please extend also the payment on to DOT by the taxi drivers? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have area code 424, last 3 digits 617. You are unmuted. Please identify yourself and which items you would like to speak on.
Yes, this is Gary Vogan. I'm the Secretary of the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. This is a non-agenda item, but it's under the purview of the Transportation Committee. And that is, of course, as you well know, that ridership at the airport has plummeted. The airport is virtually a ghost town. And despite that, our taxi cab stands, which were taken out of LAX, it really serves no purpose. Our drivers are suffering. There's only a handful of drivers now working in the city. Several companies have ceased operations, such as Beverly Hills Cab and LA Checker Cab, and the situation is desperate. Many of us have yet to receive any unemployment under the pandemic unemployment assistance program. And the times are tough for us. And we're asking, there's just absolutely no reason to keep the cabs from inside the airport to pick up what little business there is. If anyone has any eyes, you can see that the point of taking out the cab stands from inside LAX is pointless. It is pointless. Please, we need to get our cab stands back inside. And also, the Transportation Department's proposal for 4-hour vehicles proposal, that needs to be postponed till the end of the year or the beginning of next year. You know, this industry, along with many others, is collapsing. This is an industry of immigrants. This is the only income they have. We don't have the benefits of unemployment insurance that other industries have, and it's tough. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, we have an area code 323, last three digits 660. You are unmuted. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Yes, my name is Leon Slomo, President of Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. I'd like to make a general public comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to go through a couple of issues. One is the pending for-hire vehicle reform. There has been no LADOT report that was due in February. There was no proposal from the city attorney's office. There's been no discussion from stakeholders and no details on implementations. There's simply no time before July 1st to put this into effect, and especially in the middle of pandemic, while there's a pending lawsuit from Los Angeles regarding labor law violations by the TNCs, which are a central part of the proposal. While there's a pending ballot measure in November by the TNCs, without thorough, comprehensive vetting of the effects of the pandemic and the pending issues, including the antitrust issues, labor law, ADA compliance, emission and traffic, and ensuring the livable wage for drivers, is simply not the time to be doing this. The city needs to.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Okay. Next up, area code 949, last three digits 357. You are unmuted. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Good afternoon. This is Clara Carger with Central City Association, and I'd like to make general public comment.
Okay, you have 60 seconds. You may begin.
Thanks. First, we want to thank Council President Martinez, Chair Bonin, and Councilmember Kratz staff for this special Transportation Committee meeting. We recognize that significant time and attention is required to stand up a virtual meeting like this, and look forward to the updates from LADOT on projects in response to COVID-19. We're supportive of recent efforts from DOT, including pickup zones in front of restaurants, which help businesses adjust to takeout and delivery practices, and using temporary materials to test run a safer design for 7th Street before it's implemented permanently. We encourage additional ways to accommodate active recreation and increase outdoor space for retailers, food and beverage purveyors to better serve Angelenos while still upholding public health orders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see one more phone number, 213, last 3 digits, 403. You are unmuted. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. Is there a member of the public with the 213 area code, last 3 digits, 403?
Yes, can you hear me? It's Wade from Encino, the world famous. I want to speak on all items.
Okay, you have 2 minutes for all items on the agenda, plus 1 minute for general public comment. You may begin.
It's very good. Thank you for being Brown Act compliant. Now, you heard the screams at the agenda items. Look at all of the motherfucking places that you can't park the camper 7 feet by 21 feet high. Now, I got my camper, and I sawed it. I took an electric saw, and I sawed it down 20.446 inches in the length, and I'm 6.99 in height. So I'll be parking my RV in front of the house of John Lee and then the house of Nuri Martinez, if that's okay. Do I have a second? Yes, thank you. So that passes unanimously. Now, also, you hear about all this motherfucking shit with these taxis? How come, and I drive my taxi part-time, I can't go into LAX and pick up my people and pick up their bags? Now, when I don't pick up my bags and I don't pick up my passengers, I can't drive over to Jose Huizar's house and make my delivery. And I haven't been able to do it for about 3 months now, and he's getting real edgy. All you have to do is look at his Twitter account. So please allow us taxi drivers, not these fucking Ubers, not these other illegal junk car drivers, but us taxi drivers with licenses to go into the goddamn front bowl, pick up our LAX passengers, and deliver our LAX passengers, including at least 2 bags, preferably bags of cash. And that's the way it has to be, because City Hall is in a deficit because the deliveries of cash are not coming through, because those fucking taxi drivers can't get over there and back to City Hall with your payoff money. And finally, why is Nuri Martinez involved in employment discrimination? Jose Huizar is a city employee. Jose Huizar has a right to work. Just because he's a Mexican from Zacatecas don't mean that he can't work. I want him on the city council. I want him on the plum committee again. We need the leadership of Jose Huizar.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Okay, we are done with public comment. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruins, for facilitating that. So public comment for today's meeting is closed. That leaves on the agenda, as I said earlier, 7 items. Mr. Koretz, I was going to recommend for consent approval, unless you'd like to discuss in further detail, items 4, 5, 7, and 9.
The only item I have comments on is item 2, so anything else is fine with me.
Okay. So I will move that we do 4, 5, 7, and 9 on consent. Can we do the roll, Mr. Villanueva?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Bonin?
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez is absent.
Okay, so those 4 items are approved, and that will bring us now to item 1. I would like to welcome, I guess CLA is going to read the item into the record.
Yes, item number 1 is the general manager from LADOT to present a verbal report relative to the department's ongoing projects and programs, transit services offered by the department, the state of mobility for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles within the city, and recognition of the department's employees for outstanding service.
Well, if there was ever a time to be recognizing our employees for outstanding service, it's those who've been working hard out in the field and making things happen in the city of LA. Good afternoon, Ms. Reynolds.
Good afternoon. I'm hoping you can hear me okay.
I can hear you just fine.
Great. So yeah, it would be really almost impossible to choose just one LADOT employee. The parking enforcement, traffic control in particular, deserve a tremendous debt of gratitude. They have almost doubled the number of hours that they've been spending in the field directing traffic at LA Unified grab-and-go meal centers, usually 3 or 4 food banks a day, as well as testing sites, and a lot of other places around the city. And these folks are, coming into contact daily with Angelenos who are hungry, they're sick, and they're afraid. And I think that is something that our department has really stood up in a very short order. And they continue to come in day after day and encounter those folks and help them feel a little bit better and be the face of the city. Second, there are a few folks that we wanted to recognize in particular, and I will do what I normally do, which is to talk a little bit about each of them and to allow them to hear and for you to hear about sort of the individual acts of folks around the department. First, Jordan Phillips, who is a community administrative support worker in risk management. Jordan has made himself available to support the needs of the department despite the air of uncertainty, especially at first. Jordan continued to arrive on-site to headquarters and provide help whenever asked. For the last 6 weeks, Jordan has made multiple trips to PSC's Hypertech facility and picked up close to 100,000 pieces of personal protective equipment, including masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, safety goggles, and disinfecting wipes. He has then hand-delivered these items to LADOT staff who desperately needed them throughout the city. In doing so, Jordan has contributed to the city's efforts to allow essential workers to continue performing their duties and ultimately to allow LADOT to keep Los Angeles moving. Second, Lupe Sandoval, transportation engineer with special traffic ops and emergency response. I want to recognize Lupe. He's been in charge of the department's special traffic ops and emergency response section. During our response, he's repurposed his team from managing traffic at Dodger games and Ciclovia events to supporting testing sites and food drives all across the city. This weekend, Lupe and his team responded to support the fire and police departments with a major fire downtown. They launched the Slow Streets program in 2 neighborhoods in CD11 to support people getting around their neighborhoods safely. Through it all, Lupe leads his team of dedicated men and women with a calm and kind demeanor and a genuine spirit of gratitude. His humility, thoughtfulness, and dedication to excellence is expressed in all that he does, and he represents the best of LADOT. And then 2 more. First, Brian Lee, who's head of transit operations. Brian leads our coordination with LASA, providing transportation to Angelenos experiencing homelessness, to shelters and testing facilities, and YMCAs across the city. This is a really tough job that serves our most vulnerable populations and is a testament to how LADOT is rolling up our sleeves to get through this crisis. We launched this transportation service within days of the Safer at Home order and have expanded it to support the growing number of Project Room Key sites citywide. And last, Jose Hernandez, senior transportation engineer with the Parking Meter Division. Jose is instrumental in executing LADOT's temporary loading zones for restaurants and expanding it to retail. The city has processed over 500 requests and approved signs for over 350 locations, and that is because of Jose. This work will continue to be essential as businesses reopen, and we thank Jose for leading this very important work.
Is that the entirety of your remarks?
Those are all the The employee recognition.
Okay. So on that, let me, as always, thank you for doing the employee recognitions. I think it's a very important thing to do, and really even more important to do now in an era where we are learning really who is essential. And so many people who are essential are largely invisible to most people in Los Angeles prior to the pandemic, and hopefully we're seeing the significance and the importance of people's work. We want to give a particular shout out, of course, to those who helped us launch the Safe Streets, or the Family Friendly Streets program, as I like to call it, in Delray and West LA over the weekend, getting smashing reviews. Really, really happy to LADOT and Street Services for helping to make that happen. I have a question, but I think it actually fits in more with the next item, so I'll hold it then. Anything you'd like to say, Mr. Kretz?
Oh, just that the folks that we're recognizing should imagine a room full of people applauding vigorously. Otherwise, it's just the two of us on the line, but we greatly appreciate their good work. So, thank you. Thank you for
Absolutely. Okay. All right. With that, we will receive item number 1. Do we need a vote on that, Mr. Villanueva?
No, sir. It's just a discussion item.
Cool. Okay. So we will then move to item number 2.
Item number 2 is the DOT report relative to the department's response to and ongoing operations during the COVID-19 pandemic emergency.
Ms. Reynolds, yet again.
Great. So thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk a little bit about everything that we're doing. I think that all of us in public service and really across the board at almost every level of government are doing sort of 3 jobs right now. We're doing the job we were doing before the pandemic hit. We're doing the job of crisis response, and we're doing the job of thinking ahead to reopening and how we are going to live with COVID-19 for the foreseeable future, but still be able to have, the quality of life that we had come to expect. And so all of the work that DOT has been doing is really falling into a few different categories. And I'll give you a high-level snapshot right now of what we're seeing. Traffic volumes are still down. Speeds are still up. Transit ridership is down by about 70%, but there are still thriving ridership on quite a few of our lines, mostly of essential workers. And that's lines like the Pico Union line, where we have doubled or increased the number of transit vehicles on that line to make sure we can carry people to their jobs while still allowing them to be safe on the bus and maintain physical distancing. I think the thing that I want the committee to think about, and for all of the city to think about, is that as we return and as our economy comes back, one thing that will limit our recovery is if we experience really high levels of traffic congestion. And the ability for people to get around on transit if they can, on foot if they are able, by bike if they are able, is now going to become a really important part of both our recovery and our ability to continue to move essential workers. Even though we saw a significant reduction by about 90% in the number of dockless scooters and bikes that were on our streets because the companies removed them, we still saw strong ridership on the Metro bike share system. And I think that means that, people need a lot of choices for how to get around. They want those choices to feel safe, and everything that we can possibly do to make sure that everybody who can is able to feel safe, biking, walking, on public transit, in car share, is going to be key to our economic recovery. So a high-level look of some of the things that we've been doing. We're focused on really delivering critical services. You heard about parking enforcement, traffic control, an additional 3,000 hours this year over last year spent directing traffic, supporting several food banks on a daily basis, as well as the LA Unified grab-and-go meal centers and the 8 testing sites throughout the city. We've relaxed parking enforcement really because we were trying to, as much as we could, engage in harm reduction. So the fiscal fees, fines, and so on that DOT typically is in charge of levying against folks, we pulled back on, at this council's and the mayor's direction, almost right away. There is no enforcement currently for residential street sweeping, for peak hour lanes, or for abandoned vehicles. We do continue to enforce meters, preferential parking districts, posted street repair, colored curbs, and blocking emergency access. So we have not done an across-the-board relaxation of parking enforcement. We continue to enforce those rules that are safety-related or that are related to the function of a thriving business environment. We've increased the payment extension for all tickets to 60. They got an additional 60-day extension, and we froze all parking fine increases. So if people want to contest a ticket, they can do so without seeing those parking fine increases go up. We put up temporary pickup and loading zones for all restaurants, which is expanded to retail. We have actually 438 temporary restaurant loading zones installed and 29 retail since the launch of the program. On transit, LADOT Transit, we now require masks of all riders, and that's really about the protection of the transit operators and the other passengers on the vehicle. And we are actually providing masks for those who don't have them, who ride our system. We've implemented more stringent cleaning protocols. We've made transit free, and then encourage backdoor boarding to, again, allow that, try and protect as much as possible transit workers who are now frontline and essential services to get people around the city. We're also coordinating, as I mentioned earlier, with LASA to transport homeless folks to shelters and to get folks to the YMCAs that are offering free services for people during this time. Taxis, we've reduced fees and we altered the insurance requirements to relieve pressure. And then we've also asked operators to increase the cleaning protocols. We have heightened cleaning protocols and requirements for all dockless bike share and scooters. And then we've, on street safety, we've disabled almost 1,000 intersections across the city. That's about 20% of the city. We've disabled those pedestrian push buttons. And those include medical facilities. So around hospitals and doctors' offices, you no longer have to push the button to get the signal to allow you to cross the street. And then in some of the densest pedestrian areas around the city as well, we set all of our traffic signals to nighttime mode. That was really to try and deal with the speeding we were seeing across the city. And then we've launched a street safety campaign on social media and worked with LAPD to target enforcement on corridors that were having issues. In response to direction from the council and the mayor, our transit fleet and taxi industry are now also providing meals to seniors and others in need. Approximately 2,000 meals delivered every day, with an expected increase to around 4,000 total. We've also given safety guidelines for food pantries throughout the city who are now experiencing rapid upticks in congestion and needed a little assistance to make sure that they could continue doing what they were doing safely. We worked with Streets LA to improve safety along newly repaved streets scheduled through their new ADAPT program. And we want to make sure that as the quality of these roads improves, we also improve their design. So 7th Street has some brand new facilities that allow us to test out the idea of a protected bike lane along that corridor. And then we also have several other corridors in the queue that are Vision Zero or Complete Streets corridors that we're able to expedite and get those projects in much, much faster than we otherwise had. We're working with medical facilities to deal with their loading and unloading for passengers and patients. And then, Councilmember Bonin, as you mentioned, our slow street / family friendly street / stay healthy street / open street / take your pick launched this weekend in a few neighborhoods. And the application is now open on our website for anyone who wants to, any organization who wants to sponsor a slow street project in their neighborhood. We received 121 applications in the first weekend when we opened. Now, a lot of those Lord Bless LA County. A lot of those are not actually in the city of Los Angeles because folks in Beverly Hills and Culver City and Glendale, turns out, also want to have places, slow streets in their cities, and not everybody knows what city they live in. We also received a lot of requests for small projects for 1 block or 2 blocks, but we think we have at least a couple dozen really good substantive projects to be able to roll out in the near term. And as you noted, Council Member, the initial feedback has been positive with a little bit of a learning curve. I think there are, some folks who, anytime we do something new, they're not quite sure what it is or what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to interact with it. We got some interesting questions. A few folks wanted to know if there was a parade happening or why we might be closing streets. So we're taking those lessons learned and bringing them into the next project where we can do our own proactive outreach and education to help people understand what this is and how to use it. And we continue to coordinate closely with the fire department and the police department to make sure that everybody knows emergency vehicles and emergency access is still very much allowed, as well as routine things like trash pickup and all other sort of local traffic. But so far, so good on that program, and we're looking ahead to what we can do for businesses in the future and coordinating with our friends in the Public Works Department to think about ways we can temporarily widen sidewalks and create opportunities for outdoor dining and other retail as the state continues to open and everybody's ready to get back to work.
I love the parade thing, the COVID-19 parade featuring the Essential Workers Marching Band. Yeah, the feedback on the streets, I'll share a little with you, just that I got. One guy from Del Rey this morning said to some of his neighbors, I don't know about you, but it's a joy to see all the kids in the street playing, all the people walking up and down without concerns about cars, motorbikes, or traffic. I love this new way of being. Makes everything a little calmer, don't you feel? Less traffic, more calming. Another woman talked about how she was thrilled to walk around the neighborhood with her kid in the stroller. She said it was shocking how much prior to this she was forced into the street by runners or walkers with cars barreling down the streets and with strollers that are not easily maneuverable. And the final one was another woman in Del Rey who said it was really nice to see families having room in the street to play, rollerblade, etc., since other areas like the bike path are really crowded. I have not seen any problems from this. We need to give this a chance because it's great for our families. Just really great feedback. Kudos. I'm glad to see the reception has been that awesome. Couple quick questions. The stuff the department has been doing has really been amazing in response to this. Are the employees who have been out on the front lines doing all the work, are they sufficiently equipped with PPE? Or do we have more of a need?
We've had a lot of luck. You may remember that the head of the emergency management department is an LADOT alumni, Aaron Sahakian. So we have a great working relationship with EMD and have been able to get the equipment that we need. We have had to get creative when it comes to things like hand sanitizer and wipes and things that people need to use to feel like they have a little bit of control of keeping their own work area clean. And we've had a couple of challenges in parking enforcement, traffic control, and making sure that we can get the cars clean. So that fleet, that's not something that GSD provides, but something that we've been able to figure out. But I think that as we look at a long tail of living with this kind of protocol, we're going to need to come up with more and more ways to have that institutionalized, regular cleaning, et cetera. The department has shouldered some of that financial burden ourselves in getting our own contractors on board because GSD has a huge portfolio and obviously they are not resourced to adequately keep every single department in the city clean at the levels that employees are expecting. So the equipment has been good so far. The more challenging piece has been, figuring out that getting work areas cleaned and getting employees their own sort of equipment to keep work areas clean as well.
Got it. A lot of what we're seeing now that is happening, some may continue based on public health directions, the masks on buses and stuff like that. Are there any things that you're seeing that we're doing now that might be things that we keep after the pandemic, regardless of public health concerns, whether it's things like the pedestrian buttons or anything else?
Every single thing that we've done that's a temporary program, I've now challenged staff to figure out what is the pathway to permanence. So how are we going to evaluate all of those intersections and determine where we want to leave those pedestrian buttons disabled? How are we going to look at those, 400 plus businesses that have requested pickup and drop off zones and figure out, do we turn those into 15-minute zones or 30-minute zones? Do we eventually turn them into parklets or places where people are coming and doing that pickup and drop off more readily? I think that what we are seeing in the private market is continued investment in technology companies that are focused on contactless deliveries and remote deliveries. And so the work that we have to do to make sure our curbs are ready for that, and also, frankly, to make sure that our role as regulator in that field is properly established, are really important. A lot of those companies are charging significant delivery fees and not necessarily investing in their workforce. And I think that's an area where the city could continue to do a lot more work. But I think almost everything that we've done on a temporary basis should have a pathway to permanence. Because we don't want to leave foam board signs out there forever. And a lot of these things are things that people really like.
Amen. Thank you. You mentioned the Adapt LA program and the work that LA DOT and Street Services have been doing together. I know it's been a bumpy road, pardon the pun, I guess, in some ways, which has improved. Are there things that need changing or fixing that would have or would in the future make it easier as the department does that to bring things sort of into compliance with the mobility plan? Like, does certain departments need to be updating design standards, or what needs to be done to make that process more seamless going forward?
So a lot of times we, in the past, have found ourselves in the position of doing what I'll call following the paving, right? So we get a paving list, and then we go out and we run around and we try and get the time that we need to do public outreach in coordination with council offices and neighborhood leaders to make decisions about the design of the street. And I think that what the model that we should hopefully get to at some point, and I think we are moving in that direction. The leadership at Streets LA has really been outstanding and very supportive of all of the coordination that we're doing, is leading the paving. So the idea is, we have locations where we know we have neighborhood support or we have a particular issue that we want to resolve, and that, those streets become the priority streets, and we're able to have a really harmonious scheduling of those that allows us to get our outreach done, get our design done, and then have Streets LA come in and do the excellent work that they do. Bureau of Engineering and DOT have been engaged in the last year and a half in an effort to update all of our design standards for typical design treatments, and that work has been really successful so far. It is going at the pace of change that we often see when we're trying to change engineering standards, but it is underway.
Cool. Okay. I got one more question, but I want to see if Mr. Koretz has any questions before I do another. Mr. Koretz?
Yes, I have a number of them. One is, what are we doing with abandoned vehicles? I know I had an experience that I'm sure hundreds of Angelinos have had, which is years ago I had cars stolen, and it didn't appear for several weeks. When somebody finally said, gosh, that car's just been sitting there for a month in front of my house, I should probably call it in. So are we doing anything with abandoned vehicles? You know, we've had at least one abandoned vehicle case, and we called it in, and they just said, well, we're not doing anything with abandoned vehicles. So what's actually the status, especially in cases where they may have been stolen, and we wanted to get that information to them?
So to be very honest, you know, almost all of our resources right now are focused on the parking citation for an enforcement for construction zones, and then the rest of it is almost exclusively directing traffic at these locations where we're seeing kind of an unprecedented demand for food pantries and at food drops and so on a regular basis. And then also our role is on farmers markets. We actually also play a role on farmers markets throughout the city to support Streets LA's work. So we don't have a ton of resources to devote to additional enforcement. However, per the mayor's order, we are not enforcing 72 hours, so we are not enforcing OPDs and overnight, and we're not enforcing abandons at this time.
So we're not ticketing. I'm not necessarily looking for the ticket. I'm looking for the ones where they've just been sitting for weeks, and we know it's probably someone's stolen vehicle. What do we do with it? So
we just don't have the resources really to do very much of anything on those right now. If it's not something that we need to ticket or tow for a safety reason, or or we're not spending that hour on directing traffic, we don't really have the resources to do that kind of service, and it's not something we're enforcing at the moment. I'll give you a sense. I can share the actual stats with you, but it's not a small number of calls about abandons that we get throughout the city, and it's not always obvious that somebody's just on vacation, or that it's a stolen vehicle, or that it's somebody who's living in the vehicle. So we're sort of staying out of that because it would be impossible for us to discern which ones are which, and the volume of them is in the thousands. And so we're just a little, that's something that we're just not able to do.
Okay. Next question on our buses. I know we had a problem for a while that bus drivers were being diagnosed as positive. Have we done anything to test all of our drivers, and are we doing anything to mandate that our customers on those buses are all wearing masks?
Yes. So passengers are now required to wear masks on all of our vehicles, and we're actually providing masks on the vehicles so that if people don't have them when they get on, there's a place that can actually, we figured out a way to sort of safely get those masks to people on the bus so that the transit operator doesn't actually have to get very close to that passenger for both of their safety. So we are requiring masks, and we're providing them for people who don't have them. If and when people refuse to wear the mask, then we treat it like we treat any other kind of violation on the bus. So the transit operator asks the passenger for voluntary compliance, and then may ask that passenger to get off the vehicle. And then if they're not able to get voluntary compliance, ultimately they do reach out to LAPD to come and assist. We haven't really encountered that yet on LADOT transit. The issues haven't escalated to that level yet. We've been able to get voluntary compliance or to provide the mask if somebody doesn't have one. And so that's been going well. We have had a few of our transit operators test positive, and at the moment, they get the same access and assistance to testing as other frontline and essential workers do. So free tests are available to everybody in the city and county, and we work closely with the companies that deliver that service. to make sure that the transit operators have access to that.
Okay, very good. Oh, and do we know if Metro is doing the same thing?
So I know that Metro is now requiring passengers to wear masks on their vehicles. What I don't know is the detail that you're asking for. Are they providing masks? How are they getting compliance? They similarly have a contract with LAPD to do enforcement on their system. And to my knowledge, they would handle it the same way that we would, voluntary compliance first, and if not, then reaching out to LAPD. They have a much, much higher volume of riders, and so, providing free masks might just not be feasible for them. And as far as their transit operators, I actually don't know what they've been doing, if they've been giving them sort of proactively bringing testing to the transit operators, or if they've been sort of making sure that they have that first in line status to be able to get tested.
Could we find out and get a little report back to members of this committee, just to our offices, on what their practices are? Because obviously, if we're doing the right thing on dashes, et cetera, and they're not on the Metro lines, they could be responsible for a lot of spread that we're trying to avoid. And also one more question on the dashes and others that we operate. Are we requiring a small enough number on the buses to create social distancing, or are we not?
Yes, so we take 10 passengers on our 30-foot buses and 15 passengers on our 35-foot buses, which is the number that we can have on the bus and still have everybody get that safe distance from one another. And on those lines where we still have a high number of riders, we've increased the frequency and the number of buses so that people aren't waiting for, there aren't 20 people waiting together at a bus stop for a long period of time because we can only take half of them onto a bus. And so, as we, again, think about reopening and we start to see that traffic congestion pick back up, thinking about those transit-only lanes is really, I think, good for environmental reasons and also good for economic recovery and supporting essential workers because we're going to need to run more buses per hour to carry the same number of passengers because of the physical distancing that we're now wanting to keep on the buses for everybody's safety.
Right. Another area where I have a couple of questions are about taxis. Did we ever implement the change to allow a couple taxi stands back into LAX?
I don't know the answer to that question. That's an LAX question. To my knowledge, that didn't happen. I know they were on schedule to do that, and then the pandemic hit. But we can find out for sure. My suspicion would be that did not occur, but I don't know. As you probably know better than I do, they have their own separate operations, and we have limited ability to influence. We had been working with them and aware of their plan to let them back into selected locations inside the loop. But to my knowledge, I'm not sure that they actually executed.
Yeah, they seemed very willing to do it at the time, so if there's something we can do to follow up, since what limited amount of business is left for taxis is at the airport, kind of the way they get them to cling to life, as we know. Any answers to the other concerns that were expressed by taxi operators during the beginning of the week?
Yeah, I think that, it might make sense for us to have another conversation about the changes to the permit structure after we are on track to implement that. Its intent is to make it much easier for taxi companies to continue business in the city of Los Angeles and to lower the fees, actually, because a permit-based program is really about cost recovery, whereas franchise program allows us to charge more than that. So, and then I know there were other requests to extend the sort of vacation on the permit, on the franchise fees for the remainder of the year. And that's certainly something that we can take under advisement and bring back either to Taxi Commission or to you all for your direction.
Okay, and one last question, and then we'll get back to Mike's question. We were talking about scooters, et cetera. Clearly, the number has gone down dramatically. I was surprised to hear that any of them are operating, because it seems like one of the best ways to spread would be to operate scooters. Since there's one spot for your two hands, most people aren't going to wear gloves. And so they're touching a spot that has not been disinfected, and then the next person's touching it. So are we still allowing them to operate, and why would we be doing that in the height of the pandemic? And probably same with rental bicycles.
Yeah, I guess you could say the same thing about the push buttons or the handles on a bus, or the door handles on a taxi cab, or the door handles on our electric vehicle car sharing fleet. All of those services that we either provide or concession have those kinds of high contact surfaces. And the approach that we've taken, and it seems to have worked so far, is to require all of those operators to increase the number of times that the vehicle gets cleaned. But clearly it's not feasible for a transit vehicle, for example, to have every high-touch surface wiped down after every person gets on or off of the bus. And so the same is true for the scooters. We've seen a reduction of 25,000 permitted down to about only 900 of them operating currently. And so clearly, there aren't as many vehicles, and so there aren't as many rides happening. Metro Bike Share, on the other hand, which has remained in operation throughout the pandemic, and to my knowledge, we haven't really had any, super spreader events or anything like that on any of those, traced back to any of those methods of getting around town. Ridership has decreased, but not nearly as much as it has on transit. So there are people who still need reliable, affordable ways to get around that are not about owning your own car. And I think it's important for us to think deeply about how can we provide those safely to the people who clearly still need them and rely on them. And that's an opportunity for the city to lead. But I don't think that removing ways for people to get around town is necessarily, we're seeing that people still need our services, frankly. And we've got to figure out how to provide them safely. And every shared service is going to have those kinds of issues. It's not confined to one. But just to let you know, we will be bringing back to Transportation Committee and to Public Works Committee and to full council a discussion of what to do once the 6-month extension for those dockless mobility service providers ends in September. So the council approved that 6-month extension actually right at the start of the pandemic. And, we have an opportunity to think about what the program looks like in the future. So we'll be able to have those kind of detailed discussions that I know you're interested in having here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think that definitely is something we need to look at in terms of how we could keep those surfaces cleaner. It's hard for me to imagine, especially with the scooters, that there's a way to get out and clean them with frequency. Obviously, they could try and at least clean them at the end of every day at a minimum, and I hope we're already requiring that. If not, we should be. But obviously, it's easier with, as your example, taxi cabs. After each rider, they hopefully stop and disinfect a little bit. They obviously aren't going to do that with things where the vehicles themselves are unsupervised. So obviously, with buses, we can have better protocols and not wait an entire day before cleaning off handles. It's just a little more difficult with those, so we should be thinking about how we can at least improve the hygiene and make spread less likely.
Great. And then just to circle back on your 3 questions that I didn't have perfect answers to, or good answers to, parking enforcement, traffic control on abandoned. So what we can tell people to do is to call the LAPD non-emergency or LADOT's dispatch, and we will run the plates for suspected stolen vehicles. So if people think that vehicles are stolen, we can still run those plates to make sure that, to your point, people get reunited with their vehicles and we can recover. So that is still happening. I did get some information about LAWA. They are allowing taxis to queue in parking lot 3, which is across from the Bradley terminal. That was one of the places where that was suggested to allow taxis to queue. And so they are doing that. And then on Metro, Metro is not testing at their divisions, but they're referring drivers to go through the frontline worker portal on the city's website. So that's a little bit more information on some of those questions you had that I didn't have the full answer to.
Very good. And the taxi question is great, and the others as well on abandoned vehicles, but that's not that was exactly what I'm looking for. I wasn't asking for someone to tow me away because I parked in the same spot for 2 weeks too. My car would be gone too. We do want stolen cars to have some way to be retrieved, so that's great. Thank you.
I have not had to think about scooters since the middle of March. There have been some upsides to the Safer at Home orders. My last question for you is, it's actually sort of a big question. The city budget is not on the agenda today, but let me ask you then a hypothetical question. The department has been really firing on all cylinders, delivering incredible service, from my perspective, both before and during this pandemic. What would happen to the level of service provided by the department if your employees were all working 10% fewer hours?
Well, there's sort of three things going on. One is the furloughs, which, if they were occurring in a vacuum, would have a significant impact to our services, in particular, parking enforcement, traffic control, all capital design and delivery projects, many of which the design, we're able to do what we do because we are, a lot of times we employ overtime. So, we're able to get a bunch of signals in on a yearly basis because we use overtime. But under a furlough, it's not clear that we'll still be doing that. And so in any, even if we were just having to deal with the furloughs, I think you would see capital projects get delayed and become more expensive. You would see parking revenues decrease significantly across the board. But they're not happening in a vacuum. They're happening while a few other things are happening. One is that we have non-essential workers who may be in vulnerable populations who are at home, and we also have essential workers who can't telecommute in vulnerable populations also at home, either because they have trouble getting childcare, they're a vulnerable population, et cetera. And then on top of that, we have a hiring freeze in place, a hard hiring freeze in place. We even for essential frontline workers who have the ability to generate revenue, like parking enforcement, traffic control officers, we're not able to hire at the full sort of number of vacancies that we would like to fill. So that all of those things are going to contribute to a slowdown. On top of that, and this is not a criticism of any of these programs, but it's just meant to give you a lay of the land. The disaster service worker program that the city is currently rolling out is going to scale up dramatically in the short term. Contact tracing in particular is needed by the county as we reopen to meet some of those healthcare metrics that the governor and the mayor and the council have set out as key to our recovery. So they need an army of 3,000 contact tracers who can do that work. And the departments across the city have all been asked to keep a bench of workers available for that, that amounts to maybe 10% of our overall workforce, which is necessary. But all of these things taken together mean that the furloughs amplify sort of struggles and challenges that the departments were already going to wrestle with because of the nature of this emergency and its effect on our workers, because of the nature of this emergency and its effect on the municipal budget, and its effect on where our services are needed. So I think you can anticipate, you know, a real slowdown in capital projects across the board, Safe Routes to School projects, Vision Zero projects, Signal projects, as well as, you know, a significant reduction in the amount of revenue that we generate from parking enforcement, traffic control tickets. And then finally, you know, it will continue to be a struggle to continue a lot of these special programs that we've propped up to respond to this emergency. We're going to be forced into this really ugly position of choosing between, you know, some of the services we've been providing as a response to the pandemic and some, you know, other services that are part of the department's bread and butter. And so those tough decisions lie before us, and there is a limit to what innovation, technology, and contracting will allow us to overcome.
Well, none of that is happy, but it's important to have that information out there, particularly as the council prepares to deliberate on the budget. And Mr. Kretz and I, as members of the Budget and Finance Committee, are going to be spending a lot of time, I anticipate, over the next few months on it. So thank you for that. All right. So with that, we will receive this item number 2. And I do not need a vote on that, do I, Mr. Villanueva?
We still need to do a roll call, Mr. Chair.
I do. Okay. All right. So go for it.
Councilmember Bonin?
Aye.
Councilmember Correz?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez is absent.
Okay, and that brings us to our final item, which is item number 3.
Item number 3 is an LADOT report, or to present a verbal report relative to the status of proposed updates on the city's transportation demand management ordinance requirements for new developments.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Rubina Lazarian. I'm with LADOT, Supervising Transportation Planner 2 on the Transportation Planning and Policy Division team. I am also joined by City Planning. Connie Pelini-Tipton is on the line as well for questions. So today I'm providing a status update in response to the motion that authorizes LA City Planning and LADOT to update the citywide TDM ordinance that was first adopted in 1993. So just as a reminder, our last update to T-Committee was in July 2019. It was in conjunction with the update to transportation analysis procedures, including the adoption of BMT. So today, I just want to provide a status update on where we are on the development of the TDM program. Specifically, I'll cover TDM protocols, new tools that we've developed, preparation for public release, and pandemic-related lessons learned around telecommuting.
Thank you. Just so anybody who might be wondering why this is scheduled today, because it wasn't ordinarily scheduled for an update at this point, is there is probably no better time to move with urgency on incentivizing telecommuting options and ways to reduce traffic. One, because of the social distancing requirements, some of which may stay in place for a while, and people are going to want to be able to work closer to home. 2, because a lot of employers have found that, okay, it actually works okay when people are working from home. And 3, because of the concerns that we have seen over that people may have about returning to use public transit, of traffic congestion spiking in Los Angeles when people go back to work, unless we do things differently, is going to be huge. So we need to be thinking in advance, and this is a big part of doing that. So eager to hear what the latest is. Thanks.
Great. So just first, on the monitoring aspects, the reason I bring up monitoring is because a well thought out monitoring and enforcement framework is really critical to the success of the TDM program. And our team is preparing the internal mechanisms in order to support such activities that would meet the goals of our program. So LADOT recently released a request for information in order to identify industry best practices and potential strategies for an automated monitoring structure. We did receive 12 responses and are currently reviewing those responses. In terms of new tools, we are working with a nonprofit partner, Hack for LA, in order to develop a beta TDM calculator. This new tool is a user-friendly tool that simplifies the process for applicants who are required to meet TDM requirements. With the assistance of LA City Planning, we also developed an internal technical advisory committee of staff, both from LA City Planning and LADOT, who are beta testing the calculator and providing critical feedback. The beta tester feedback will help to refine not only the program requirements, but also the design and usability of the public-facing tool. In terms of, or in preparation for public release, in addition to developing the monitoring protocol and user-friendly tools, staff are also preparing program documents, including the draft ordinance, the program description, and outward-facing applicant support materials. And just like most other programs, we're pivoting our outreach plans and incorporating more opportunities for virtual engagement in anticipation of continued pandemic conditions. So on that note, just on the pandemic-related lessons learned, LADOT is also gathering those lessons learned during this time when a key TDM strategy, telecommute, is being widely piloted. So we're surveying our own LADOT staff on the effects of working from home. Part of these questions also relate to VMT reduction, trying to get at those the benefits related to the environmental aspects of telecommute. And we're coordinating closely with the personnel department in this process in order to expand data collection and incorporate lessons learned into a future telecommute program, as well as the future citywide TDM program. So we've already updated the draft TDM program menu of options to include a new strategy, telehealth. Telecommute was already on the list, but due to the number of benefits associated with telecommute as well as telehealth, those types of virtual appointments can reduce drive-alone trips, they could reduce travel time costs, and just allow people more time at home or with their families. So we're working closely with regional and national partners on all of these fronts in order to take advantage of the available data right now, as well as the resources that we can pool and share together. So with that, that wraps up my status update, and we can take any questions you might have.
Thanks. Mr. Kretz?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Just wanted to sort of tease out a little bit more the status of our working in parallel with LA Metro. Are they moving in a way that is synchronized with us, or are they faster, are they slower?
We're actually in very close, our timelines are very similar, which provides for a great benefit. As I mentioned, we're working with regional partners. I was alluding to LA Metro there. We're part of their TMA network, which pulls together a number of cities who are either already have TDM ordinances or are working on updating their ordinances, as well as the transportation management organizations and associations in the region. So through this coordination effort, we're able to learn from one another as well as share our timelines and our progress. So we're in very close synchronization, and I think that's a real benefit to the region as a whole.
For sure. Is there anything that has been new or different as a result of this pandemic that we're now trying to incorporate? Or need to start incorporating?
I mentioned, I think, just looking at our strategies, and that's been a big core part of the program from the beginning, just our focus on flexibility and being able to adapt with the times. So we're seeing the benefits of that already, but I think we're just assessing if any other changes are needed at this time. Okay.
And is this something that would I mean, obviously, it's going to need council approval because it's an ordinance. Is it something that's going to have to go to the Citywide Planning Commission too?
That's right. That would be part of the ordinance adoption process.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we need to, that's a god-awful slow process. So let's strategize about how we can try to move things through the process a little faster. You know, joint committee meetings at this level and stuff like that. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the update, and thank you for the good work. I mean, we need it more than ever.
Yep.
And thanks to planning as well. Okay, Mr. Villanueva, do we need to vote to receive this item?
No, sir. It's a discussion. It's a verbal report only. Nothing was submitted.
Okay, got it. Okay. So we will continue this item, I think, without objection. And I believe that wraps up the agenda. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. That leaves the desk.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody on staff from the clerk's office, city attorney's office, LADOT, planning, any other agency whose faces I cannot see on my screen, for helping us out today and pulling off our first virtual meeting of the Transportation Committee. I think we're going to be doing this for a while. I want to thank Mr. Koretz for spending some time with us this afternoon and making sure we had a quorum to do that. And thank you, of course, to Eric on my staff for playing moderator of public comment. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you in council tomorrow morning.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
We are adjourned.